Rule 7. Use more than one example. From A Workbook for Arguments by Morrow and Weston. A single example will sometimes work for illustrations. The example of Juliet that we saw in the previous video might work as an illustration of an early marriage. But a single example offers next to no support for an argument using generalization. Juliet could be an exception, for example. One spectacularly miserable billionaire doesn't prove that rich people in general are unhappy. Given this, more than one example is needed when using generalization in an argument. Alright, let's look at an example. French fries are unhealthy because they're high in fat. So all fast food are unhealthy. Okay, this is a bad example, because notice that we're generalizing from a single example of French fries being unhealthy to the conclusion that all fast foods are unhealthy. So here's another example. French fries are unhealthy because they're high in fat. Milkshakes are unhealthy because they're high in fat and high in sugar. Deep fried chicken and cheeseburgers are unhealthy because they're high in fat. So all fast foods are unhealthy. This still may not be a great generalization. We'd have to survey a bunch of different kinds of fast foods, but generally speaking, it's much stronger than the previous example. When you're coming up with generalizations about small sets of things, the strongest versions of the argument should consider all, or at least many, of the examples in your small set of things. A generalization about your siblings should consider each of them, for example. And a generalization about all of the planets in the solar system should also include all of the planets in the solar system, because it's a small set, and the generalization is going to be better if you can consider each example in the set. Now, let's consider generalizations about larger sets. Generalizations about larger sets of things require picking out a sample from that large set. This is because we can't list, for example, all of the women in earlier times who married young. Instead, our argument must offer a few women as examples that apply to all of the rest. How many examples are required depends partly on how representative they are, a point that we're going to take up next. It also depends partly on the size of the set being generalized about. Large sets usually require more examples. The claims that your town is full of remarkable people requires more evidence than the claim that your friends are remarkable people. Depending on how many friends you have, even just 2 or 3 examples might be enough to establish that your friends are remarkable people. But unless you live in a very teeny town, many more examples of people are going to be required to show that your town is full of remarkable people.